Hello everyone, welcome to the first video of my channel. In this video, I'm going to dive into the science fiction movie Predestination, which has a very complex and mind-blowing story. This movie was released in 2014 and its story is about an agent whose job is to travel through time and prevent a massive bombing in New York. Basically, the organization he works for tries to stop crimes before they happen. In this video, we're going to dive into the mysteries and complexities of this film, so if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers. Let's get started. The story of Predestination doesn't follow a straight timeline. Instead, we have a time loop with no real starting point. Everything keeps repeating again and again. But to make it easier to understand, I will pick one point in time and explain the story from there. Jane was born in 1964, but she was kidnapped by the bartender character. He travels through time and takes her back to 1945, leaving her in front of an orphanage. Jane grows up in there, and because she's very special, she decides to join a space program, but when they find out she's not fully female, they reject her. Around 1963, Jane meets a man who's actually her future self, the character John. She falls in love with him, but because of the bartender's mission, John leaves her after a short while. Jane becomes pregnant with John's child and gives birth in 1964, the same baby that the bartender kidnaps and takes back to 1945. So now we realize that Jane, her father, and her mother are all the same person. Some fans have a theory that this could actually make sense. If two people with the same DNA have a baby, the baby would have exactly the same DNA too. I'm not sure about this, but in the movie, all three are one and the same person. After giving birth, Jane finds out the doctors have operated on her and changed her gender. She chooses the name John for herself and decides to adapt to her new life. Years later, John goes into a bar and meets the bartender. He tells him his life story and says he hates the man who got him pregnant because that man destroyed his entire life and he wants to kill him. The bartender tells him, I can take you back to that time so we can find the man. So they travel back together to 1963, the same year when John met Jane. John realizes he's the same man that Jane fell in love with. He finds the relationship with her so exciting that he decides not to leave her this time. But the bartender shows up again and tells him he must take over his job as a time agent and find a bomber. So John becomes a time agent and continues the bartender's mission until during one of his missions in 1917, while trying to find and stop the bomber, his face is burned. He returns to the future in 1992, where he undergoes multiple surgeries and gets a new face. That's when we realize the bartender himself is actually John or Jane. Remember early in the film when the doctors tell him he might not recognize himself anymore? They even mention his vocal cords are damaged, explaining why his voice has changed. At that time, they tell him he has just one last mission left. John then travels to 1978, where as the bartender, he meets his younger self and takes him back to 1963. Meanwhile, he goes to 1978 to make one last attempt to catch the bomber. He confronts the bomber, but the man escapes. Then he hears a noise and goes towards it, only to see his younger self trying to defuse a bomb and his face is burning. That's the same scene we saw at the beginning of the movie, but this time from the older John, the bartender's point of view. After that, the bartender travels to 1964 to kidnap baby Jane. At the hospital, Robertson appears and warns him not to make too many unauthorized time jumps because it could cause brain damage. He also tells him, you're our best agent because you have no past and no future. Eventually, the bartender retires. All along, he's been recording his voice to train his younger self, John, to take over the job. After retirement, his time travel device is supposed to be deactivated, but one day he finds a letter from Robertson telling him to go find a bomber. He follows the lead and discovers that the bomber is his own older self. The bomber tells him, don't kill me. If you kill me, you'll become me. But the bartender kills him anyway. This raises the big question. How does he eventually becomes the bomber himself? As Robertson said, too much time travel causes mental damage. That's why some fans believe that due to brain damage, he eventually follows the same path and becomes the bomber, influenced by the bomber's own writing and ideology. In the end, he's killed by his younger self, the bartender. Everything forms one endless loop with no beginning or end. I tried to summarize the entire life of this character from birth to death, but honestly, I don't even know what name to call them by anymore. Now the big question is, why does the bartender want to keep this loop going? Why does he kidnap baby Jane? Why does he send John back to 1963 to meet Jane? Maybe that's exactly why he becomes the bomber, because without the bomber the loop couldn't exist. The only explanation that makes sense to me is that he can't exist without the loop, so he keeps it going to preserve his own existence. But there is also another theory that it's all Robertson's plan. He's the one who wanted the loop to continue. He never deactivated the bartender's time machine because he knew this cycle would lead to the bomber's creation. Maybe that final mission he mentioned was actually kidnapping baby Jane to keep the loop alive. Why? We don't know for sure. Maybe because John was one of their best agents and stopped countless crimes. So Robertson wanted him to keep existing through the loop. I hope this breakdown helped you make more sense of this movie. I would love to hear your theories too. If you have your own understanding of Predestination, drop it in the comments. See you in the next video.